Hey guys. Well, happy Tuesday and happy New Year. Is it too late to say happy New Year? Maybe. So I am so happy to have Danaus Chang with us today from awning.com. Danaus, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Super excited.
Well, we're excited to have you here. So when we have anyone on the show, I really love to just start at the very beginning and ask how you got into real estate investing, because most of us have some, pretty scary stories about, first starting out and all the mistakes we made and all the money we lost, or whatever. And then, the journey along the way is always a fascinating story to hear. So let's jump right in, and audience members, as you guys join us, fire questions at us. It's a live broadcast, it's raw, it's uncensored, so don't be shy to fire questions at us. On that note, Danaus, yeah, tell us about your first investment property and how you got into real estate investing.
Yeah, so let's go back to my heritage and my background. I'm actually talking to you from Dallas, Fort Worth. I
Okay.
moved here during COVID because this is where we actually grew up and this is where my family's based. And my parents immigrated from, or Chinese heritage, immigrated from
Okay.
Taiwan to Fort Worth, Texas. A lot of people are like, how did they end up there? My dad ended up getting a scholarship to TCU, which
Okay.
lost, but made it pretty far in the championships just yesterday. But basically, they immigrated here. They had very humble beginnings. My dad was a teacher. My mom worked in a factory and in the daycare, and they saved up a lot of money. And with that money being saved, and I'm being a little bit nice about it. They were really, really cheap, and and they saved up.
It's a
They
fine
saved
line between frugal and cheap.
frugal and cheap. I think they were pretty cheap, and that's kind of the ongoing joke. But I can say it. So they saved up as much money as they could, and they had the big American dream of buying their first house. So they bought a first house, and in Fort Worth isn't a tiny town, but it's not massive either. Let's rewind all the way back to the 70s, but they basically purchased the house, I think, for like $30,000. And my siblings were born, I was born. They saw another house come on the market, I think a couple of years later, on the same street. It was a little bit better. They decided they wanted to purchase that house, but rather than selling that last house, they ended up renting it out. And long story short, this became something that they kind of hacked and repeated over and over again. And so I grew up around all of that when I was, I don't know, as young as like 10 or something like that. I remember visiting these rental properties with my parents and actually like fixing toilets. Actually, I was probably just playing around, but I ended up learning and started, work on fences, fix toilets, all that good stuff. So it was just part of my DNA. Ended
I
up
love it.
going to University of Texas, graduated with a degree in finance, and started going in that entire path, working in technology and a few other areas. But um, what the big thing my parents ended up pushing towards me was, go get your first house, but get it as early as possible. And right when I graduated, I ended up working for Deloitte Consulting. And I remember getting so excited because they gave me a signing bonus. And with that signing bonus, the big intention was I'm going to use that to go purchase my first house. So I was like, I don't know, 21, 22. I'm all looking for a great house in Austin, and that's where I went to school, and that's where I started working. And I put my first down payment for a really humble kind of house, kind of in the outer skirts of Austin, but still within Austin. And I realized, oh, that's not enough money for a down payment. I had to go get, my parents to help out a little bit on that side. But I purchased a 4 bedroom, 2.5 bath house in Austin. And I don't know if everyone listening has heard the term house hack, but basically there's lots of different ways to hack a house. But what I ended up doing was, in this case, I purchased the house and then I recruited 3 of my best friends to go be my roommates. And we were trying to figure
I've
out
done
what's
that
something that's
myself.
really
I
fair
love it.
for them. Yeah, you've done that, right? Trying to figure out what would be, really fair for them, but fun for me, and beneficial to me. And basically, I took all my payments, the mortgage, the escrow, taxes, those types of details, and divided amongst three people. And that's how I came up with the rent. So they basically paid my mortgage and my taxes, but I put down the down payment and such. And that's how I got into owning my first property that I
It's a great
lived
way
in
to get
and
into the
rented
game.
out.
I love it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So from there, how did you scale up your real estate portfolio? What changed for you? Because I mean, obviously there's a speed limit on how many properties you can house hack, right? So that's something you can do, for a couple properties, but you can't build a big real estate portfolio by house hacking. So how did you scale, and how did your strategy change over time?
So I was living in Austin. I'd lived there for a few years, living in this house that was, kind of like this frat house of people. And at some point, I started focusing a little more on my career. I started working for a home builder called Pulte,
Okay.
and did a little bit of work for them, and then ultimately ended up getting recruited to work for Lennar, which is another large home builder based in the Bay Area. And I basically was like, okay, I'm going to go get paid, twice as much and make a lot of money and moving to the Bay Area. But then I realized, whoa, well, houses were like literally 3 to 4 times as much at the
Crazy
time.
expensive. Yeah.
Um, yeah, exactly. And so I was kind of bummed out that I didn't feel like I could afford a house to go, buy and then go do this house hack thing. I ended up renting a place, but I still was making, money and saving. So I decided to actually go buy another investment property. And I didn't know the Bay Area well enough, but I knew Austin pretty well. So I looked for another property there, not too far from the property that I currently owned. I found a renter for that property, found this other property that wasn't too far, and purchased that. The specs are almost exact: 4 bedroom, 2.5 bath, a few blocks from each other. But I knew I could go rent that thing out. So I ended up taking an investment loan, I believe, at that time. So it was maybe an extra percent point on top of that. But I saw that I could at least, break even or cash flow positive a little bit, and it just seemed like a no-brainer to me.
Yeah, I mean, Austin, as you know, has become a very expensive housing market.
Yes.
I'm not sure when you were buying there, but it was probably still somewhat expensive then, but still easier to find cash flowing properties in Austin than in the Bay Area, where it's almost impossible to find rental properties that cash flow positively. Talk about a brutal
Yeah,
market.
and I'll date myself a little bit here. I was buying kind of in the mid 2000s or
Okay,
so.
so a little
So
more affordable.
uh, yeah, definitely a little more affordable. Um, and I'm happy to talk a little bit more about uh, sort of that journey. But I would say, buying that second property as a pure investment property, that's what actually sealed it to say, you know what, I am a real estate investor versus this accidental, landlord or
Right.
accidental real estate investor. And just kind of thinking about the fact that I wanted to build a portfolio similar to my parents, but also at the same time, I couldn't afford to buy in one area, but I still wanted to own something. Um, just made me feel a little bit better. But as a whole, buying an investment property with intention, that's when I started really feeling like I was a real estate investor.
So from there, did you continue buying properties in Austin? How did you grow your portfolio, and how big did you eventually grow your portfolio to?
Yeah, so I'm close to about 20 total units all in. My parents, they're older, moved back to Fort Worth to be a little bit closer with them. They've kind of grown their count to around 30 or over. So we're
That's
kind of
great.
working together with our own little family portfolio. But
Love
um,
it.
yeah, so yeah, thanks. I think the question about how did I start to move into some of these other properties. After I bought that second property, um, actually let's go back to some interesting times, and I think it's really interesting for people to understand this market that's correcting right now, and then looking back and saying, when's the last time that happened? And the investors out there have probably heard about 2007 to 2008, then 2009, which was this kind of like crazy wild real estate curve.
It's a tough time to
Tech
live
was
through as a
involved in
real
that.
estate investor.
Oh yeah, it
I
was
got
crazy.
pretty
But
badly burned.
okay, so check out this story. Basically, um, a lot of the downturn was really because back in 2009 and into 2008, a lot of that really happened because people were overextended. Anyone could get a loan. You just kind of sign up. And one of my buddies was just signing up for credit cards, and this was kind of the early days of trying to get miles and points. But
Yeah, travel hacking.
I got yeah. So I was like, okay, what is this cool thing? I've always been super interested in and stuff like that. And I signed up for a credit card. I had some decent credit at the time, or I was building credit, and um, I I ended up getting this offer that was just super weird. It basically was something like a balance transfer for up to $35,000, and the rate was something like 1%. And you always read the fine print, and you're like, okay, 1% for a year. This was 1% for life.
What?
And I was like, what? And I showed it to my buddy. He's like, dude, I got one. I did something like this. And it actually had a check in there. And so you write the check and you can write it to yourself. And I was like, let me just see what's up with this. And I did it. And cash was in there, and it was at 1%. You had to pay it on time. You had to set up auto payments, or it'll jack up to whatever 14% or whatever it was. But I basically had like 35,000 of extra cash at
Wow.
1%. So
I've never heard
I
of
said,
no limit on that introductory
oh,
APR period for a
it
credit
was
card.
that's how wild times were back in the days. I think they were hoping I just missed a payment or something like that. But
Right.
um, I didn't add anything else to the credit card. I just did the auto pay, and so I got 35,000. I added a little bit to it, and I wanted to do some more shopping. I still was like had this thesis about Austin. Not to where Austin is right now, or but I always felt like it's got strong student population. It's a cool hip city. It wasn't super expensive. It could cash flow, and so I started looking for properties. I ended up finding this 4 unit property, and then that's how things started kind of getting a little bit better in terms of getting deeper. And I found this 4 unit property, and it was like completely underpriced, and it was a few hundred thousand. Kind of did the math on that. This cash flowed really well. I didn't know even the term cap rate at all, but I think like looking at it, looking back, I think the math, I think it was like a 9 cap or something like that in Austin.
That's great.
And I ended up making an offer and purchasing that property. I was remote. If, I can get into some details about the horror stories behind it, but it ended up being like a net positive out of the whole thing. I moved really quickly, purchased that property, ended up going through a few different managers, but got some tenants in place, and I still own that property today. The equity has quadrupled, I think, or so. And I look back, and it basically was like equivalent to zero down, um, type of
With that
investment.
35,000 that you got through the credit card at the
Yeah,
1%
yeah,
for life
yeah,
interest rate. I
yeah,
love it.
exactly.
I love it. Yeah, no, I love hearing those sorts of stories where people got creative with their down payments. And in fact, on our blog, some of the best performing articles that we have are about how to get creative with down payments for rental properties and investment properties in general. So I always love that stuff. You mentioned that property did come with a few horror stories. I'd love to hear a few just brief examples of how things went wrong for you, horror stories, painful lessons that you've learned, because I have found, both personally and from listening to other investors, that it's the things that go wrong that teach you the best lessons in life, not the things that go right. So, I always like to hear people's, horror stories about what went wrong and what they learned from that, and what other investors can learn, hopefully the easy way, by listening to your stories about that.
Yeah. So I grew up in a cheap to frugal type of environment, and bless my parents. They worked their butts off to help support the family, and with very little support of their own. And they did what they had to do. But some of those values they were passed on to me, and I have them today. But I will say, when I think about that property and maybe even some of the other properties that I invested in, um, I was more cheap than I was frugal. And so the way I kind of think about cheap is, what's the analogy that people use? Penny wise, pound foolish.
Yeah.
I was that in certain circumstances. And I think I just wanted this like fun story that I didn't actually invest very much. I almost got like a free property, out of nowhere, and I carried that on. So I said the property was underpriced. It was underpriced for a reason. Okay,
Mm.
it wasn't just I got lucky and stuff. I think it was a mix of luck because I was able to find this really great property, but it was also underpriced for a quick sell, and there needed some rehab to be done. So I went around just kind of find and ask, who's somebody that you can trust to do some of the rehab, renovation associated with that. And I got all these numbers that were like a lot more than I wanted to spend, tens of thousands of dollars. And, I was just like, all right, I just want somebody to do this a lot cheaper. What can we do? Because I bet you can get it printed up pretty fast. So, um, somebody introduced me to somebody, and he was kind of this fast talker, but he gave some examples, and I was like, oh man, you're literally half the price. So I moved forward with him. The guy that introduced me to him, he was like, oh, I haven't really used him, but I just heard about him and I heard he's like cheap. So I'm like, okay,
All the
awesome.
red flags. Yeah.
All the red flags, but I'm just like, it's not even dollar signs, it's like negative dollar signs in my eyes, where I'm like, okay, this is gonna save me
Saving
some money.
signs. Yeah.
Totally, exactly. And I moved forward with him. He fixed the property. I think he like sent me a couple of pictures, and I'm just like, okay, I don't live in Austin. I This looks good. I was like, I need to find a renter. And this was, it wasn't as easy to just go kick off and go find renters remotely. So I asked for some recommendations about property managers, and I mentioned that over to this handyman, this renovation. I call him a handyman now, but he basically said, "You know what? I have experience managing a few properties. I'll be happy to manage your property as well." I'm like, "Oh, what's the rate?" And he goes, "I don't care, whatever you want, just a few $100. It'll be easy." And I thought this would be awesome. I was like, "This guy can fix the stuff. He can manage this stuff." And out of nowhere, I got some rents in place. He found some tenants, and I started getting some checks sent to me directly. And about 3 months in, I didn't get any payments, and I called him. It's like, oh yeah, they're having some trouble and this and that. And long story short, on this one, he basically ended up just like going MIA, not ever sending me any of the money, and that's not just one part of it. That's only one part of it. I had to go get managers, and so I found a proper property manager. They went in and did an assessment, and then they said, "Hey, you've got tons of repairs that you need to do, and
Mhm.
every single person is complaining." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh." And they're like, "Yeah, he used the cheapest materials, all sorts of stuff." So at the end of the day, I actually ended up having to spend more than I would have if
Right,
I
to
had
redo
actually
all the
gone
work.
to redo all the work. So um, I've learned I am still value oriented. I get multiple quotes. I leverage my own network. I'm a little scrappy. I'll even like fix things if I'm in the location myself,
Oh, good for
just
you.
because it's kind of fun. Yeah, I used to do more of that when I had more time before my child being born. But basically, I like to save as much money as I can. But that was the extreme that I completely learned my lesson on. So there's a balance. I'd say.
Yeah, I've totally been there myself. I've made those exact same mistakes. I've brought in cheap handymen to do repairs that were way out of their league, and I've done all that stuff. And I've brought in bad property managers. So the whole time you were telling the story, I was like, oh man, I know exactly where this is going because I've been there myself. So yeah, word to the
Understand.
wise out there. Hire good people, and you can find good value, but you need to verify the value, right? I mean, you need to actually go and look at the work that they've done, and get valid referrals from people that you trust, and all that stuff. There's
I know.
definitely no.
I actually own a property, a few units in San Francisco,
Oh,
and
do you really?
through a referral, it's actually my co-founder at Awning, and we'll talk a little bit about Awning. But my co-founder used him, and he's amazing, and he's like good, well priced, trustworthy. But it took lots and lots of time.
Oh
And
yeah.
then honestly, I think I got lucky that I knew somebody who had used them and then passed them on to me.
Yeah. Well, let's switch gears here for a second and talk about awning.com. So I love that you guys are looking to disrupt the real estate investing industry to an extent here. And so tell us exactly what Awning does and how you help real estate investors.
Yeah, great. So, myself, my friends, my colleagues, my family, one of the biggest challenges we've had is investing in real estate. I wish it was just as easy as like buying a stock or something like that,
Yeah.
or even just like halfway as easy. It's so challenging finding the resources, finding where to buy it. All the stuff that I went through and what my family went through. So we wanted to find an easier way. To kick things off, what we decided to do is look at all the data that's out there and see how can we use data and technology to go make that process a lot easier. And we found out the best way to be able to do that is to get access to data, and the best way to get access to data is to be your own brokerage. And so we started off as our own brokerage in California. We've since expanded to 6 other states. So we're in 7 states right now. We essentially have evolved into a Redfin for real estate investors
Okay.
with the expectation to transition to more of a Zillow for real estate investors. And so, kind of the key difference is we are a brokerage right now, and we help individuals find properties, make transactions, and essentially negotiate those properties. And then from there, we can actually help them manage the properties. So, there's a few caveats in between. We use data and technology the way Redfin and Zillow does right now to help price some of those properties. But also, when you think about it, going to Zillow, they got their Zestimate, they got some other details. And that's cool. I think a lot of real estate investors still use them, but there's a couple of key things that are missing from that. It's what's the potential expected appreciation, what's expected rent, and then also some of the things you're looking for, long-term rentals, really trying to understand the demographic, the types of renters that are going to be there, short-term rentals, what does it look like if you were to have short-term rental occupancy, what does the income look like, the expenses associated with that. So we gathered all of that and then basically hand it over. So if there's a property that's on the market, you can search for that property. If it's not on the market, we can also give you a short-term rental kind of estimate associated with it. But basically, we're able to calculate cap rates, potential returns associated with that, and give you the ability to actually sort and look for certain properties that have certain types of returns. And then based on all of that, you can like those properties. And then we have full client service teams that end up helping you hold your hand to go purchase that property and do the negotiation. We started off, a few years ago with a bigger focus on long-term rental, but the market has shifted and people are looking for more yield. And so we've gotten more and more people really asking and requesting for more short-term rental support. So we have shifted more of our focus to be on short-term rental. As part of that, we tried our best to go partner up with some really great short-term rental property managers. We didn't have a whole lot of success. And then basically we were like, you know what? rather than handing them over to someone that is going to hurt their return, why don't we do this ourselves? So we've also built property management for short-term rental into our offering, which we have in-house using, again, data and technology to help create a little bit more of an edge.
So let me ask you this, since we shifted for a moment here to talk about short-term rentals. I've heard some analysts express some concern and skepticism over where the short-term rental market is going. The thesis basically being that there's an oversupply of short-term rentals on the market right now. That the market just got flooded in the wake of the pandemic. And one piece of evidence that they point to for that is that for the last 8 months, occupancy rates for short-term rentals and Airbnb have been steadily declining. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that. As someone who sounds like you're bullish on short-term rentals in general.
Yeah, so there are definitely higher supply than there was before. Um, and the thing that we've noticed is, anything that as just like basically too good to be true type of situations, which we saw a lot of. And so myself, I got a little bit lucky. My family members and a lot of other people, we tried out short-term rental pre-COVID, and it was decent. It was good. It was good. Suddenly, COVID ended up happening. I think everybody knows the story. Everyone locked down. They wanted more space, and everything just started skyrocketing. What we started to see is a bunch of people wanting to cash in on that and get involved. But some of these people didn't really think about it as um, a pure investment type of play. They wanted to, be involved in that type of property, living in it as well. And what we have a lot are some self managers that um, kind of just got into the entire game, more for a hobby or more for a little bit. I don't know. I'm not going to use the term greedy, but just kind of looking for a faster buck and such. And it's attracted a variety of different types of folks. And what it has led to, what we've seen in the press, is just a lot of people creating some really bad guest experiences just because they didn't have
Mm-hmm.
the full experience associated with that, mixed with some saturation in certain areas. What we started
Right.
finding out, if you start to pull that apart, the opportunity is still amazing. It's still really big. It hasn't been institutionalized, and that's a good thing, because basically there's a lot of opportunity. We're not saying we're going to try to institutionalize it, but what we're saying is there's a lot of opportunity to formalize things and create better
And
processes
professionalize. Yeah.
and professionalize. And I think that's actually the better term. Um, and and that's where we've seen our us at Awning pilot this out, work with a few different folks, identify areas that aren't completely saturated, and professionalize the entire guest experience. Use data and technology to price this right. If it's not turning fast enough, let's dynamically start to reduce the price to get people in regardless. And so, at the end of the day, I think that there is still a massive amount of opportunity, but you're going to have to pick, the right areas, and then also expect to invest a little bit more in the guest experience, invest more in better furniture, things like that, those types of details that are going to cost more. And if somebody's going in to go make a quick buck, they're often going to fall into the trap that I fell into. And then it starts to create this kind of like, not so great guest experience. Your revenue starts to go down, more people are involved, those types of things.
Bad reviews. Yeah, one of the things that I have seen in that space is that people love the idea of buying a second home, like a vacation home, and they think that they're going to pay for it by just renting it out on an Airbnb when they're not using it, and they have another thing coming, right? I mean, I mean, like they don't, they're not approaching it like a business. They are not analyzing the cash flow accurately beforehand. So anyway, I'll get off my high horse there about about that. But it sounds like that's what you've been seeing as well. Is that a lot of people just get into it without approaching it with the professionalism that they really need to consistently earn positive cash flow with it. So as someone who is in the real estate investing technology space, I'm curious about your thoughts on how you see technology changing real estate investments moving forward, both in the short term, over the next year or two, and longer term, through the end of this decade.
Yeah, a lot of the old school real estate investors, some of them became accidental, a lot of them pre technology, my parents included, would put signs out and kind of estimate what felt right, in terms of what those rents are. Now we have data and technology to go make things a lot more efficient and have longer and broader types of reach. And so I think as a whole, efficiency is kind of the key to everything. When you think about the way you've traditionally bought a property, and this isn't for everyone that's listening today, but how it's been in the past is you talk to a trusted real estate agent that someone that is referred to you by another friend, and what we end up finding out is vast majority of those people literally, and we did some research on this, it's over 95% of real estate agents do not have a focus or deep experience in working with investors. And
Right.
um, and because of that, they can't take it from that more of a business ROI type of mindset. And so, with other companies like Awning, um, being able to have that data, aggregating it more an investor type of focus, we can make smarter decisions. And you can do that on your own. Again, leveraging our site to be able to identify what's the highest cap rate type of properties that we estimate out there, or even working with a company like us or others that have more experience in the investment world. We have seen more technology companies, but also just the real estate industry start to shift and build more support for real estate investors, and that's something that's amazing and great. But there's still a lot more opportunity associated with that. But I mean, back in the days when I just started investing, I think Redfin and Zillow was just like brand new, and I just thought it was the very coolest thing, and I just kind of used it in a way to get a little bit more of an edge against other people. Now, there's a lot more opportunities that have ways to, even predict pricing, be able to pull aggregated rents. What does that look like? And then, allow you to make smarter decisions. I also think, at least in the short-term rental type of world, because there's so many additional factors, it was always, more challenging. Like you're talking about seasonality, those types of details. Again, there's a number of tools out there. We leverage some of those, both proprietary and working with partners to help predict what that pricing could be based on factors that could change on a daily basis. But just imagine how you used to do that even just a few years ago.
Sure.
A
Yeah. I
lot
mean,
of
if
guess.
you're yeah, if you're in a town that has like a big event, right? Like if you're in Augusta, Georgia, and you have the Masters golf tournament that once a year just spikes all the all the short-term rents and nightly rates. That's something that it's helpful to have good data on that going back, so you know how to price your Airbnbs and so forth. And one other way that I've seen technology really change real estate investing over the last 6-7 years is we've really seen a lot more long distance investing.
Yes.
Like I mean, you were actually doing this a decade ahead of the curve with that. Living in the Bay Area and investing in Austin, but it's just gotten so much easier to buy properties long distance nowadays with virtual tours and with all the good data available and platforms like Roofstock out there. Yeah, and so we've actually nationwide, there's been a huge jump in the number of sight unseen investment properties bought long distance by investors. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what kind of trends like that we see over the next decade.
Yeah. That's a really good point. I think 95% of our clients that end up purchasing properties with us do not go see the property first. We've
Oh,
set
wow.
up a number of different avenues where we leverage, on the ground types of teams to do video tours and do inspections and things like that. But the level of fidelity that we're able to offer through that is fantastic. But that wasn't possible back in the day. So much of it was like trusting a person, and even at that time, how much trust do you want to put into one person if it could have some big risk associated with it.
Absolutely. Danaus, thank you so much for joining us today. We've put a link to Awning in the comments. How else can people reach you and connect with you about what you guys are doing over at Awning?
Yeah, Awning, it's awning.com. So feel free to reach out directly there. We even have a phone number. You can kind of surf around. We have got a bunch of really great free tools that do some pricing. Go check that out. You don't even have to fully register to get access to that. But yeah, there's a number of links within there where you can set up a phone call and speak to a live person to help support things.
Imagine that, being able to speak with a live human being in today's world. I love it. Well, Danaus, thank you again, and we look forward to staying in touch with you. Audience members, stay in touch with us. Let us know what you want to hear about, and we will catch you guys on the flip side.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it, Brian.